On a winter night in 2006, a gang walked out of a cash depot in southern England with £53 million. It was the largest cash robbery in British history. To do it, they kidnapped a man and his family, disguised themselves as police, and held the staff hostage through the night. It was a brilliantly planned crime. But £53 million is a very hard thing to hide. This is the Securitas depot robbery. Welcome to Curio Hour, where we uncover the strange, the unsolved, and the unforgettable. Today's story: the Securitas depot robbery. Our story takes place in the town of Tonbridge, in the county of Kent, in southeastern England, in February of 2006. On the edge of the town stood a large, unremarkable building. It was a cash depot operated by a security company called Securitas. A cash depot is a kind of warehouse for money. Banks across the region send their cash there to be counted, sorted, stored, and redistributed. At any given time, the depot could hold tens of millions of pounds in banknotes, making it one of the most valuable and tempting targets in the country. The building was secure, with locked doors, alarms, and security staff. But the gang that targeted it understood a key weakness in any such fortress: the people who run it. No matter how strong the locks, someone has to hold the keys and the codes. And that someone has a home and a family. The gang built their entire plan around this. The man who held the keys was the depot manager. We will simply call him the manager. He was an ordinary man with an ordinary family, doing a responsible job. The gang spent time watching him, learning his routine, his route home, and the details of his family. Their plan was as ruthless as it was simple. They would seize control of the manager by threatening the thing he cared about most: his wife and his young child. With that leverage, they could force him to open the depot. The operation began on the evening of the 21st of February. As the manager drove home from work, a car with flashing blue lights signaled him to pull over. Believing he was being stopped by the police, the manager pulled over. But the men who approached him were not police officers. They were robbers in disguise. They produced what looked like police identification, told him he was needed, and bundled him into their vehicle. The manager was now a hostage. Meanwhile, at the same time, another part of the gang went to the manager's home. Posing as police, they told his wife that her husband had been in an accident. His wife and their young child were taken too, lured out, and then seized. The entire family was now in the hands of the gang, held captive at a remote farm. The manager was told the truth. His family was being held. If he wanted to see them safe, he would have to cooperate fully and get the gang into the depot. It was a terrible position. With his wife and child in danger, the manager had little choice. He agreed to do what they asked. In the dead of night, the gang took the manager to the Securitas depot. Using his access and his cooperation, they got inside. Once in, they rounded up the staff working the night shift. The employees were threatened, tied up, and held at gunpoint, forced to cooperate. The gang had complete control of the building. They had the manager, the staff, and access to the vault. Now they just had to load the money. And there was a great deal of it. The depot's cages and vault held an enormous quantity of banknotes, far more than the gang could possibly carry by hand. They had come prepared. The gang had brought a large truck to back up to the loading bay and haul away the cash in bulk. For around an hour, they loaded cash into the truck. Cages and bins full of banknotes were wheeled out and emptied into the vehicle. When they finally stopped, it was not because they had run out of money. It was because the truck was full. They physically could not fit any more in. In total, they had taken around 53 million pounds in cash. They actually left tens of millions more behind, simply because there was no room to carry it. With the truck loaded, the gang made their escape into the night, leaving the bound staff and the terrified manager behind. The robbery had taken just a few hours. The staff eventually managed to free themselves and raise the alarm. The manager's family was later found, frightened but physically unharmed. When the authorities grasped the scale of what had happened, they were stunned. 53 million pounds. It was the biggest cash robbery the country had ever seen. The gang had pulled off an audacious, meticulously planned crime. They had the money and a head start. For a moment, it looked like the perfect heist. But they now faced the same problem that haunts every great robbery. What do you do with 53 million pounds in cash? Such an enormous amount of money is incredibly difficult to hide, move, and spend. It is bulky, it is heavy, and any sudden display of wealth attracts attention. 53 million pounds in banknotes does not fit in a suitcase, or a safe, or even a single room. It has to be stored somewhere, guarded somehow, and spent slowly enough that no one notices. And that, time and again, is where great robberies come undone. And attention is exactly what the gang got. The robbery was front-page news across the country, and the police threw enormous resources into catching those responsible. The investigation was vast, and the gang, for all their careful planning of the robbery itself, had been far less careful about what came afterward. The breakthroughs came quickly. Forensic evidence at the farm and the depot, along with the abandoned getaway vehicles, gave investigators valuable leads. Witnesses came forward. The police traced the vehicles used, the properties rented, and the people who had been seen in the area in the lead-up to the crime. And then there was the money itself. Some of those connected to the gang began handling large amounts of cash, which immediately raised suspicion. Large sums began turning up. Bundles of cash were found stashed in vehicles, hidden at properties, and connected to associates of the gang. One by one, the threads led the police to the members of the gang and those who had helped them. Arrests began within weeks of the robbery. The investigation reached across borders. Some suspects had fled abroad, and international cooperation was needed to track them down and bring them back. A wide cast of characters was eventually caught up in the case. The main robbers, the inside helpers, and those who had laundered or hidden the cash. The trials that followed were major events. Several of the key figures were convicted and handed long prison sentences for their roles in the robbery and kidnapping. The use of kidnapping and the threat to an innocent family made the crime especially serious in the eyes of the court, and the punishments reflected that. Justice in large part had been done. Many of those responsible were behind bars. But there remained one stubborn, unanswered question. Where was the money? Despite the convictions and the recoveries, a very large portion of the 53 million pounds was never found. Investigators recovered a significant amount, but many millions remained and remain unaccounted for. The money had scattered and largely vanished. Some of it was likely laundered or spirited abroad. Some may still be hidden away somewhere, waiting. And some members of the gang were never caught at all. It is believed that one or more people involved in the robbery escaped justice entirely and may still be enjoying a share of the missing fortune to this day. The Securitas depot robbery remains the largest cash robbery in British history. A crime of cold planning and ruthless execution that very nearly succeeded completely. Brought down in the end not by the locks or the alarms, but by the simple impossibility of quietly hiding 53 million pounds. The Securitas depot robbery.